Hello there. I'm David A. Specht, and I want to be your coach. If there's anything that I have learned in my 30 plus years of leadership and coaching, I have learned that mindset is everything. Join me and my guests as we explore the positives and negatives of that thing between our ears. This is Keep This in Mind. Hello, folks. Welcome to Keep This in Mind, brought to you by davidaspecht.com. And I am, of course, David A. Specht. And today's show is a very special one. It's been probably a year in the making. Max Nijst, who's a person that I was on his show about a year ago, and we've been trying to trying to coordinate the reciprocal, because Max's story is really profound. I mean, in a day and age where going from here to there seems more difficult than it ever has been before, Max has taken his own personal life into a journey going from here to there, meaning going from a place of addiction to a place of freedom, and then taking that freedom and going to the next place, which is empowering others. So Max, welcome to the show. He is the mind, the heart, and the spirit behind Fearless Happiness with a Y. It's a podcast, it's a book, it's a coaching system. Max, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me, David. I remember when you were on my podcast, we had such a great time. So again, it's an honor to be here. Thank you so much of thinking to me. But like you said, thinking of me because things, life gets so busy, right? Mm-hmm. But we gotta, we stay focused on getting from here to there. And yeah, I'm glad to be here. Thank you so much.
So Max, for the audience, I mean, we could talk an entire hour about the journey, but I want you to kind of talk about this because your story, while not quote unquote unique, is uncommon, meaning the number of people who can break out of addictive cycles and then take that almost what you would consider a liability and turn it into an asset moving forward is very rare. So kind of tell people, number one, where you came from, how you came from, and then how you came out and into the next thing. I think that would be the best way to get us going today.
Absolutely. So my journey began almost this year in September, I will celebrate 21 years clean and sober. And on the 27th of September, to be exact, it's a date I'll never forget. But where I came from, I grew up in Orange County, California, to a single mother, as my brother and I. And to try to give you these almost 21 years in I'll do my best to break it down, right? But here's what I like to say, whether I speak on a stage or at a meeting or whatever, is what happened was I went to a party when I was 13 and I didn't get home until I was 32, almost 33 years old. And lots of headache and heartache in there in between, right? I wasn't the best student in high school, but I was a jock, right? But when there was no sports, I was the guy that got along with the stoners, everybody, right? That's who I rolled with, is like whoever had the party materials, that's where I was going. And, it innocently started, like I said, at 13 years old, smoking a little bit of marijuana, drink a little bit with some friends. And it wasn't bad during junior high, but it was when in high school, like around my sophomore year, because I grew up on a block where some of my friends were 2 years older that went to the same high school. And, they were throwing the kegger parties and all the stuff like that. And I started to experiment, but little did I heed the warnings back in high school when, I started dabbling in not just marijuana and alcohol, but cocaine and it started getting progressively worse. I even got in trouble in high school at one point. That didn't scare me, but it did scare me enough. Cause I remember I would go out for the weekends, right, on a Friday, Saturday, and then I would come home and sleep all day Sunday. Right. And my mom, being the hard worker that she is, and I remember one day she just came into the room and she said, "This is not going to happen. Not in my house, right? You're not going to go party all weekend. and come home and sleep all day on Sunday and not do the things I asked of you. And so you have some choices, right? And the choices were, she gave me three choices: either work full time. Second choice is work part time and go to school part time, or go to school for full time. And I kind of looked at her like I was just graduating high school, and I'm like, I didn't even like going I barely graduated high school. Like, so being a student to me at that time was not in the picture, like mom, I wanted to tell her, mom, I barely graduated high school. Why would you tell me to go back to school? You know what I mean? But if you knew my mom, that would come off as disrespect, and I'd probably get hit with a pan or something, like, or get out of my house. So, I listened to her, and then what came to mind, and I don't know if you remember back then, but this was back in 1986. The Navy commercials, right? They would show the fleet on the ocean, right? And they would say, this is not just a job, it's an adventure, right? And they would show the airplanes leaving the carriers. Like, just Top Gun came out.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're coming right off the heels of Maverick and going on, probably everybody thought they were going to fly an F-14 if they joined the Navy at that point.
Right. So that's what I'm going to go be a pilot, right? But not thinking that I don't have the grades or the mathematical aptitude to, at that time, to want to do that. But I'm going to go to the Navy. So I went to a recruiter and I signed up for the Navy. And I remember coming home to telling my mom I'm going to the Navy. At first, she was kind of shocked, but then she looked at me like, okay, that's better than you laying around and me getting mad at you and having to kick your butt out of my house. And I knew if I didn't get some type of structure, I still, because of football, you know what I mean? Like, I knew during high school, like when it was sports time, football, wrestling, like I would do good. I would get my C's and, so I could participate in sports. But after that, like the grades would drop. I'd barely get the grades I needed. I graduated high school with a D average, I believe. And I go to boot camp in San Diego, and I remember graduating. Then I get my orders to go to A school, which was in Treasure Island, right up by San Francisco, right across the Bay Bridge. So I go to school, and I graduate. I go to school, and so when you get to school, the first thing before, like during their orientation, right, they give you this sheet. It's called a dream sheet. They want to see where you'd like to go.
Did it in the Air Force.
Yeah. So
it's the big lie, because you never get what's on the dream sheet.
Exactly. So knowing me, right, and the path that I was on in high school, I was, if I wanted to get as far away as I could. So I put I can remember clearly. So one of my first ports that I would like to get stationed at was Spain. Second one was Portugal. And then the third one, the closest to the States I wanted to get back to was Hawaii, right? So I figured I can get one of these three, right? The luck of the draw, any of those would be better than going back home. So I do my schooling, right? It's like a 90-day school. I actually do really good because I'm applying myself. But see, at the same time, though, because I'm 18 years old. So let me go back a little bit. So I get to San Francisco, right? And it's on a weekend. And a couple of guys I met go, hey, we're going in. It's Fleet Week. Let's go into town, right? Because on the piers, so all the officers would have to stay on the ship, right? And they would do tours with the civilians, right? And then on the pier, there was a concert going on, a free concert for us enlisted guys and anybody else that wanted to part, right? And lo and behold, it's one of my favorite guys ever. And it's, oh my God, he's a famous, I just drew a blank. Like a blues rock guy. I forgot. He passed away. God, what's his name? Anyway, it's a big name guy, right? And it's all the beer you can drink. So I'm 18 years old, and it's like I've arrived. Like right? Yeah. I'm in uniform. I can drink while I'm in uniform, right? Because like even back on boot camp back then in '86, if you went to the PX or the I forgot what they call it on base, right? The bar on base. If you were 18, you could drink. Right. You just couldn't drink. You couldn't leave the base and go drink, but you could drink on base. So I'm just like, wow, if this is what the Navy's going to be like, I'm in. I can all the beer I can drink, not realizing that this was going to end soon. And so anyway, I graduated school in the top 5% of my class, And here comes that day. I get my orders. I rip the envelope open to see where I'm going. And it's, lo and behold, Long Beach, California, which is 20 minutes from my home, right? And like I said, remember in high school, I wasn't heeding the warnings, but I knew when I got those orders, I remember calling my mom and saying, "Hey, mom, look, don't pack up the room," right? Because she was going to make her room into like her little office, sewing room, whatever. And she goes, "Why?" And I said, "I got stationed in Long Beach." And she goes, "What happened to this? Is it not just a job? It's an adventure." I go, "Well, I guess my adventure is going to be at home, right?"
Wow.
And so I get stationed there, and I'm doing my time. But here's the thing, David, right? Not knowing that I have those addictive behaviors, right? Because I'm not, in high school, I could have, if I would have heeded the warning signs, I knew. But when I got home, I knew I'm in trouble. There was something in my gut said, right, I'm back. I left the frying pan, but now I'm back in. Yeah. And lo and behold, right, I start partying with my friends because they're just out of high school too. They're all going to college. They're all doing the college thing. But, as you know, around college is one big party scene. You know what I mean? Like that's all they do. If they're not studying, they're partying. If they're not at the frat house. Like I remember going to Rush Week when I was in high school one time. And I couldn't believe these houses, right? They were all not the sororities, but the frat houses, right? And they were literally sponsored by the beer companies. You would walk into these houses, right? And you'd go to this back room and there would be kegs of Budweiser, right? Amongst the other things they were making, or Coors Light. And I'm like, I was, 18 years. It was before I went to the Navy. And I'm like, well, maybe college ain't so bad, right? No, Max, just keep going to the Navy. Anyway, so I land back home. I start where I left off. And I start partying, not caring. And see, at that time in 1986 is when they started the zero tolerance for any drugs.
Yeah.
Because I remember back in the day, I've heard from old timers that were in the military, like you could smoke weed, you wouldn't get in trouble.
Right.
But so I remember coming up to the ship one time, and I hadn't been using or anything at the time, but there they are, the MPs with their dog, the drug sniffing dogs. And if it was your turn, they would tell you need to go pee.
Yeah.
Right. You go over there. Well, one day it was after I partied, I get, I do a UA and I end up getting pulled aside one day from the commanding officer of our group. And he's like, "You tested positive for cocaine." Right. And I didn't lie to him. I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, you're getting 45 days restriction, 45 days extra duty," which meant I had to stay on the ship. So I'd work my regular shift and then I'd have to work at night an extra, for however many hours they needed me until my 45 days was done. And I remember calling my mom, and see, this is where the addiction, I can see where it was getting bad. I call my mom and say, "Hey, Mom, I'm not coming home for about a month. I got these training drills I got to do." Right. But she knew, she could tell by my voice, because later on when I would get sober, she would tell me, "You thought I knew what happened. I knew you got in trouble." Because,
moms know.
Yeah.
Moms know. That we think we're real smart and we try to hide it from them, but they know. I can. My mom used to tell stories back to me about me.
Yeah.
And you're like, "You knew?" And she goes, "Of course I knew. I'm not an idiot,
Yeah, exactly. Moms know everything.
Moms know.
So I do that. And in that process, right, because I'm on the ship, I decide like it's time to mellow. And I actually, at that time, I hurt my ankle. And I had met the lady who is now my ex-wife at that time. So I'm starting to date, and we find out she's pregnant, right? And in this process, I've hurt my ankle like 3 times, where they're just like finally the third time after the swelling went down, I remember they could put my leg out and twist my foot and I could almost see the bottom. That's how bad. The doctor would say, "I wish you just broke it," right? We would have just put a cast on you. You're good. But now we got to operate and you're probably going to let go. So I ended up going to the naval station there and working on the naval base until all this medical stuff's over. But like I said, I meet who is now my ex-wife, find out we're going to get married, right? We're planning a wedding. And then we find out she's pregnant. And that was one of those moments I knew I remember I threw out a brand new pack of Marlboro cigarettes that I've done. I didn't smoke the whole time she was pregnant. I drank a little bit, but I quit everything else. I quit, you know what I mean? Like I didn't do what my friends were doing. We had our son. This kind of leads in. So as I'm getting ready to leave the Navy, right, we have our son. And then I get out of the Navy with an honorable discharge under medical conditions. And then I'm trying to find my way in this world, right? Because in my head, it was like, just because I was military, I was going to get that CEO job. Like, oh, you're military, we're going to give you. Little did I know that wasn't the case, right? Like, and it was, but I ended up through her father getting a job with Xerox, which I liked very much, and it was a division that at the time was the only money maker for Xerox. Like it was because there was things going on, but I worked in a really good division. But here's the thing: so 3 kids later, as we're going through this marriage, right, it's starting to go south. I'm starting to drink more. You know what I mean? And then, long story short, because of my addiction, and I wasn't really doing it while it was her, but the drinking was really bad. And I would lie about stupid things. Like you could tell, like when someone's been drinking, you could smell, and I go, no, I haven't been drinking. Mm-hmm. And she just looked at me like, what? Like I could smell it coming out of your pores. Right. We ended up getting a divorce. And that was like the catalyst of my addiction really taking off. Right. Because as we separated, the only things that would hold me together would be my weekends with the kids. I would have them every weekend, and I would tell friends no coming over because I'm with my kids, right? I'm off limits until, I don't have my kids. But my addiction's getting worse, and it's getting worse, right? And, I'll go deep because this is one of those things that really just put me in the I don't care mode, right? So we get through our divorce. I come home from work one day and I'm living with my mom, right? And there's a message on her answering machine. So it was my ex saying, hey, call me at this number. And it began with a 202 area code. And when you get one of those feelings in your gut, like this is not going to be good, and I didn't want to call it at first, but I remember I got the courage. I called and I said, hey, what's going on? And she says, well, I took the kids and I moved to Nebraska and I'm not coming back. And, I can't explain the drop of it felt like my heart, I like the soul was sucked out of my body. Mm-hmm. And I just I couldn't even talk, right? Because, it was heartbreaking to tell it, you know what I mean? But it was here's the thing, to be honest, it was the permission I needed without getting it to go, now you get to go full speed ahead, and that's how addiction works. You know what I mean? For those who are truly addicted, once you lose that power of choice, your life is run by the alcohol and the drugs or whatever you're doing, or it could be food, gambling, sex, pornography, right? And I spiraled really, really quick. And, and again, fast forward, right? So you can just imagine I'm barely, I get introduced to meth at this time. My brother had just gotten out of prison, God rest his soul now, but he had just gotten out of his first term in prison. And, I found out he was doing meth intravenously, right? I found his little stash, right? And I convinced him to teach me how to do it. I mean, there's a whole thing I could get into how that went down, and he didn't want to. And I'll remember he's like, I'm not doing that. And I said, well, I was in this room with him, which was my room. And there was one way in, one way out. And I looked at him and I said, you either teach me how to do this or you're going to have to fight your way out. Right. And I put my brother in that situation, which down the road, I made my amends for doing that. Right. We made amends to each other. But I basically told him, either fight me or you're going to have some dude that I don't even know or someone I don't even know do it, and I could see after he taught me how to do that, he was just like, he left. I ended up getting in trouble that night and getting rearrested and doing a violation for a year. But long story short, so that's happening, right? My drinking is not working, even though I'm drinking every night. I get introduced to meth, and it was like, That was the Holy Grail, right? So I didn't have to feel those uncomfortable feelings, right? Those feelings, right? My kids were gone, the divorce, just where my life had ended up at that time, right? And so now I have a combination of alcohol and methamphetamine, and I'm just like, okay, cool. I don't have to feel ever again. And it went downhill quick. So that's part of my story, which, as you know, it gets worse, right? Like addiction gets worse. It never gets better. And she ends up coming back 9 months later, right? And says, hey, the kids, I'm back in Orange County. Come see the kids. And by then, I'm just a wreck. Like I've probably lost 20, maybe 30 pounds from drinking and using meth. I'm not the same guy. And I remember what happened was I borrowed a friend's car. I said, hey, look, can I borrow your car? I get to go see my kids tomorrow. I don't want to miss it. So what I did is I parked out in front of her house and I fell asleep. It was during the summer. It was one of those hot summers in California. And I remember I put the seat back, fell asleep, and then the next morning I get woken up to a tap on the window, right on the passenger side. I'm sweating. So you can imagine how I must look. And I put the seat up, I'm sweating. I look over, and there's my wife, my ex-wife, and her 3 kids. Our 3 kids, excuse me. Our 3 kids. And she's just shaking her head, like she felt so bad because she hadn't gotten remarried. She told her husband at the time, she goes, he's spending the night so he could spend the night and see the kids, right? And I stayed the night with them. I got to see the kids. But David, let me tell you that guilt and shame that kicked in was so intense. After that night when I left, or that next day when I left, that would be the last time I would see my kids for about 9 years.
Oh my gosh.
And they could be next door, literally in the house next door, because I wasn't stopping my using, right? I'm continuing, because every time I would come down or something would happen, right? Those feelings come up and I would go, I know what's going to make me feel better. And I would drink or use meth, and it would just became a vicious cycle. And, I became that dad who made the empty promises. Oh yeah, I'll come see you this weekend coming up. And then I wouldn't show up. And I did that for a long time. So fast forward, I'm trying to give your audience without, so just so you're imagining how that looks. I have that book, and I think I showed it to you before, right? With that picture, which was my second to last arrest. And so I finally, I'm getting in trouble with the law, and it's starting with minor infractions that turns into misdemeanors. And then I get my first felony, right? My last arrest. I get arrested. They send me to LA County. Long story short, again, I do 5 days. And back then, if they didn't come get you on the 5th day, whoever the jurisdiction was, wherever you had a warrant from, right, which mine was Orange County, then on that 5th day, LA County would have to let me go, right? See you later. But good old Orange County came and got me that last day, said, no, you're coming, right? And I'd already done a 30-day violation, a 60, 90. Now I know I'm going back to Orange County, and I'm going to be there for at least 6 months, right? Well, 4 months if you have good time. So I go back to court, and this is where my journey in recovery starts, right? I didn't know what that looked like. I didn't know, but I'm going to court, and I remember, and I think your audience needs to know this too. So part of my journey, right? I'm in jail. I think it's the first or second week my mom comes to visit. And she's had it like up to here by then, right? Because I've made her empty promises over and over and over again. And remember, she just looks at me through the glass, picks up the phone, and before I could say a word, she says, I love you, son, but you're no longer welcome at my home. If you come near my home, I'm going to call the police. And if my neighbors see you and I'm not home, they're going to call the police. What are you going to do? And I still get choked up when I think about it, because that had to have been hard for my mom to say, because she didn't do that with my brother, right? She was always open arms, but she got finally towards the end, got tired of both of our, excuse my language, crap, right? Like she ended up moving one time, and me and my brother showed up at my aunt's house, and she's talking to my aunt about moving. We've got a new place. And I said, oh yeah, where are we going to live, Mom? And she goes, what do you mean? Well, you got a mouse in your pocket? Like, no, I'm not telling you. And so I'm in jail the last time. And like I said, normally you do 4 months on a 6-month violation, which means because if you're in there working and doing good, you're not getting in trouble, you'll only do 4 months. But I'm in there and I'm, the judge, like the first time, he just looked at me like, you haven't done anything I asked, so I'll see you next month. Right. So I go back next month and they want to send me to this place called the Phoenix House. And, I'm like, I heard about this guy because we talk in the jail cells, right? You don't want to go there. Right. They have this thing. I'm sure it's called something else, but they sit you in the middle of a circle and they bash you. Right. I called it confrontational therapy. And I raised my hand, Your Honor, look, I'll probably have a new charge if you send me there. And he's like, I remember him just looking at me. He goes, I don't want to deal with you. I'll see you next month. Come up with another place. They want to tell me I'm going to go to this place called the Hope House where they have a timeout bench. Right. And you cannot move. You have to have your feet on the ground, your hands on your knees, and you got to sit straight up and you can't talk to anybody. You can't. Yeah. So I raised my hand again and he's like, what now? And I said, well, Your Honor, timeout bench, really? I go, that's something I'd give my kids. If you put me there, I'll probably get up and walk out and be back in your court again. And he just looks at me and he's like, I got to tell you, I'm not letting you go. I'm not letting you go to the streets. You have done nothing I've asked of you. So there's only 2 ways you can get out of my jail. I find you a place to go, treatment wise, like a place where you can learn it, or you're catching the bus to go to state prison. Those are your only 2 choices. So I'll keep you here until I find one of those for you, and I'm like, oh, wow. So I go back. And like I said, I go back, says, I'll see you next month. So at this time, it's like, I'm going into month 5, right? I'm past the 4 months because he says you're not going anywhere. And I talked to this guy that I meet, one of my cellmates, and it was like a sober living / treatment center, right? And he says, all you got to do, he goes, dude, just stay sober, work, pay your rent, and they leave you alone. I said, okay, maybe I can do this thing. But I didn't, at the time, David, I didn't know what AA was about. I did know what NA was about. But before I got sober, I would always go to these meetings they sent me to, and I'd always see a friend, he would meet me in the car. And guess what? We wouldn't even stay for the meeting. We ended up getting high in the car and then going off and doing our thing. Right. So he tells me about this place, and I get a new attorney at this time. And she goes, I'm going to try to get you. It was called Pacific Park. And she goes to fight for me. And the judge, at this time, he says, okay, stand up. He goes, we talked about it. I'm going to send you to this place. And I'm like, okay, cool. Maybe if I can do 60, 90 days, I'll be good. Right. And I'm like, I'll be back to what I know best. And I remember him just telling me, he looked me in the eye and he said, I'll send you to this place, but you're going for a year. And if you slip up 1 millimeter, you're out. You're going to prison. I will send you to prison. All right. So here we go. Fast forward. I go to this place. I do really well in the beginning. I'm starting to go to AA meetings. Right. But when I look back, it was like I was in those meetings to look good. Right. I wanted to be the best sharer. Right. I wanted to, I know the big book. Here, listen to me. I'm really sober. Right. But in reality, I was just trying to fool everybody, especially myself. And because I had 4 relapses in that place. But here's what happened, David. So at 6 months sober, I had been writing, when I first got to this place, I had been writing my ex-wife saying, I really want to see the kids. I'm sober. Please let me see the kids. I'm doing well now. And no answer for 6 months. So I'm figuring she doesn't want to talk to me. Right. I can't blame her because of what I've done and not been there for so long. And then I'm at work one day, one of my first real jobs in recovery for me, back in the workforce. I got a real job. I've got insurance. I'm paying my child support. And I have my first flip phone, right? So I felt like a big shot. And I get this, I'm going to get a tool out of the truck, and I get a call. And it's, hello, is Max there? I don't even recognize the voice. It's my ex-wife. I go, yeah, who's this? Excuse me. She says, it's Susan. How are you doing? The kids want to see you. And I literally almost fainted, David. Like my knees got weak. Like I thought, you know what I mean? Like, wow, she's She goes, I got your letters. I had moved, so I didn't get them till just recently. And I was going through your letters. Yes. I live in El Cajon, which is down by San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
Come visit the kids. So my brother and I, who got sober around the same time, I say, hey, little brother, let's go. I mean, I get to go see the kids. And he would go with me down there every weekend, right? And I'd see my kids, and I start seeing them pretty regularly. And then lo and behold, the addiction, right? The as they say, the sneaky disease popped up again, right? And about a week shy of 10 months sober, I go out and relapse. I go back to the old neighborhood, right? I'm going to get the guy sober that I used to party with because I'm super sober. Well, that didn't happen, right? So a total of 4 relapses later, right? I'm, how do I put this, right? Like I stopped seeing the kids again. So 5 months goes by. And I'm trying to, this has all happened in, you know what I mean? And I'm trying to give you the highlights, right? But that was one of those moments, right? It was because the last relapse, I was actually in the sober living environment. I was at the house when I got high. And the manager knew when he saw me. He just looked at me and he said, Max, office now, right? He was going to have to test me, and then he would have to call my PO. I'm definitely going to go to prison. But here's where my faith, right, was restored. Like I believe in a higher power, which I call God. God showed up that day in the form of the director of the facility, who never came on a weekend, let alone a Sunday. It was a Sunday. It was September 24th. I'll never forget. And she shows up. I hear her knock at the door. I just gotten dressed. And it's her name is Sue. And she's like, how you doing, Max? She couldn't, she didn't know. And how you doing, Max? And before I could lie, I told her, I said, look, Sue, I did it again. I'm getting ready to go to the opposite test. And I'll never forget, she gave me the biggest bear hug and said, get out, pack a bag, get out of here. I had a car at the time. Get out of here for 3 days and come back and test clean, and we'll start over. So my sobriety date was back on the 27th, right? Because 3 days had gone by. And there's a funny story that if I can tell real quick, I know but I think it's important for your audience to understand like where I've come from and how being sober has saved my life, right? So I'm first night I'm in my car. Second night I get one of the guys that was at the sober living who ran out of money, was kicked out because he didn't have enough to pay his rent. So I put him and I into a motel room for the night. I got the cops came because they check the list, and if your name comes up, it'll show you're on probation, so they come search your room. I go, I got nothing, and they're like, okay, good. Make sure you go back tomorrow. And I said, okay. And then that night, I think it was on the 26th, was a friend of mine who had just graduated from that program, who was engaged to get married, had 2 years sober. He said, hey, Max, come stay with me, and then tomorrow morning you can go back. Right. So they fed me. Right. I stayed with them, and I remember it was getting late. It was like almost midnight, and I'm getting ready to go to sleep. Right. And I remember I looked at the clock. It was about 5 minutes or so before midnight. I hear the door open, the light's on. He comes walking out, turns on the light. And he goes, hey, bro, get on your knees. Right. You got to understand, my head is from doing the drugs. And I'm like, whoa, I go, I love you, bro, but that's your fiance's back that way. And he goes, no, stupid. He goes, we're going to pray together. And then I'm going to say a prayer for you. We're going to pray. And I still get emotional because that was the first time that any man that, what I mean, that sat with me and prayed with me. Well, he did. And I remember he was done. And it was 5 minutes or so after midnight, which technically was September 27th. And that has been my date for the last almost 21 years. And I haven't had to change it. Right. So I go back, I complete that. And, and now I want to kind of fast forward to where the challenges I've had in my recovery that I've told you about before.
Right.
Right. So, because I can give you so many more, but here's the thing where my faith and practicing my program has helped me a lot and allowed me to meet friends like you. Right. Because if I was the same old guy, you and I wouldn't be sitting on here for sure. Right.
Right.
So like 7 years ago, now almost 8 years ago, I would lose my sister like 3 days after I turned 13 years sober. 8 months later, on May 24th, I would get the call that my brother hung himself and lost his battle to addiction. And then 6 months later that year, to the day, on Thanksgiving Day, my mom passes of a broken heart. And I'm 14 years sober at this time, and that following Monday, I put my youngest daughter into treatment for the first time. And then as recently as 4 years ago, now I would lose a granddaughter at 3 months and a day old. And then a week after her death, I'm on my way to work, and my son, who's going to be 35 next month, almost dies of a massive stroke because of his addiction. And not once did I think about ever using again, but I had those like, okay, God, like you need to relax now. You're putting me through these trials here, but like, I don't know how much more I can take. But what happened was, it reaffirmed my faith as he took care of me, because while I was staying with, in my car where my son was hospitalized, because you couldn't stay in the ICU room because he was on life support. People from all over the country, because I belong to some recovery groups online, right? It was day 7 and I was doing this live, right? And I had a friend text me, check your messages, right? Like blowing me up, like check your messages. I'm like, all right, Aaron, what are you talking about? Well, all these people knew that I was staying in my car, put their money together and bought me a motel room for 3 days. So I could shower and rest and be there for my son.
Wow.
Right. And in this process of recovery, I met the girl of my dreams. I've been married to my wife for almost 7 years now. She's been amazing. Supported me in writing my book. I wrote a book, as you know, and yeah, that's kind of like in a little bit. I know we're probably going over the half-hour mark, but
we'll do a two segment podcast too.
Right. But that's what's happened. Right. And that's why I'm so passionate about what I do. I've been working in the addiction field for going on year 16, and helping others get clean or get sober has just been a passion of mine. I never get tired of it. And as you know, I started my own kind of coaching where I coach, anyone who wants help, but high performers, CEOs, executives, whoever that are not really going to go out into the world and say, I'm struggling, I need your help. Right. And I help them through mindset and it's like recovery coaching / substance abuse counseling / mindset and accountability, and just helping them get on that path so they don't lose what they work so hard for. Right. And it's been a blessing, right? Because now I'm sitting here with you on your podcast, David. And, we had an amazing interview when you were on mine. And I appreciate you letting me tell my story. I know it's hard to cram into a half hour, but my point is when you make that decision, because when that lady told me, go take off for 3 days, right? I had that conversation with God and I said, God, look, if you keep me sober, if you get me sober, I will do the work to stay sober. And here I am almost 21 years later. Has it been easy? Not all the time, right? But it's been worth the work. Because now it's opened so many doors and opportunities, right? To meet people like yourself and others like you, and right, just and be a family man. And right, I'm a grandpa. I tell you, I'm a grandpa at 10, right? That's one of the greatest gifts, right? I got my wife and my kids back, and it's just been an amazing journey. And sometimes it's like it's all about your mindset, right? How you look at things at that certain moment. And that's what it's been for me.
So as we take the breadth of your story, and I was making mental notes, throughout your journey, one thing that I noticed was that it wasn't a lack of want to. You kept wanting to do the right thing. You wanted to take yourself out of an environment. You wanted to, and it seemed like external factors kept coming back into your life, which, for lack of a better term, triggered the addiction in some cases. What was the thing? You talk about the go home for 3 days and come back, and in that time, prayer and meeting with God. But somebody could look at that story and say, but what made it stick? Because you've now talked about, be past that, there were external factors,
right,
that could have easily knocked you back into addiction, because what was before
Right.
there, again, okay, I'm at the, I get stationed, by the old hometown where all my buddies are all doing the thing, and that
Right.
that rode me into addiction. On this side of it, I've got people very near, dear to my heart, dying tragically, dying unexpectedly. What was the difference in that line that you drew? That this side of it was I slipped back into addiction, but this side of it, I'm stronger and I'm able to help others. What was? Is there a singular thing that you can attribute that to?
Well, I think it's coming to that belief that there was something out there greater than me. You know what I mean? And it was that moment, right, when that lady showed up, right, out of the blue on a Sunday. Like, who? She never came by the place on a Sunday, let alone a weekend, but a Sunday of all. And I had become friends with her because I'd been at the facility for so long, right? But for her to show up and just, out of the blue and then give me that, like, I'll never forget that bear hug. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to be okay. It was like God wrapping his arms around me and going, go do this the right way this time. So, like I said, when I made that promise, I told God, I go, no matter what comes my way, if you keep me sober, I will stay sober. I will do the work. Right. So that it was that moment. And another instance, my sponsor, right, who's been my sponsor for almost 21 years now. Right. I was that kind of guy. Like, if you, because I'd seen it, right. And I'm the one that's going to test you, right? That's probably the 4 relapses, like, right. But what happened was I realized that man loved me and cared for me and only wanted the best for me without wanting anything in return, right? Because when I got my year sober, his wife took me aside and goes, I never seen that man cry until your last relapse when he thought you weren't going to make it back.
Mm.
And that guy has been here for me since day one. Like, he's never looked down on, like, through all those relapses and other things I've done, even in recovery, right? Made mistakes. We all make mistakes. He's never like talked down to me. He's always had that. I call him my Yoda, right? Because he's always been there to guide me and then go, what was the lesson you learned? Right. And I always tease, I always say this on every interview, right? I'm going to walk into his office or his house one day, and he's going to be in the middle of the room floating with this green aura telling me to use the force, Max. Keep using the force, right? But I love that man because he always was there to help me, one, face what I had done, right? Taught me accountability, right? Because when I was having issues with females or work, right, I couldn't go to him and complain.
Right.
Right. And that's how all my mentors were at that time. The one I chose to hang around with, they would always go, they made sure they were clear. Max, if you're going to come to me with a problem, I want to hear what your part is first. I would look at them like, I don't want to do that. You know what I mean? Like, what? Right. But it's taught me, right? Before I open my mouth and complain about something, I always, now it's been such a habit. It's like, what did I do to cause this? What was my part in it? Or what can I learn from this? Right. So those were the 2 things that were instrumental in keeping me going. That man not leaving my side, and that lady who said, right, take off for 3 days and come back. Right. I knew somebody was looking out for me.
So, yeah, that was definitely a God moment. I mean, all the way down to the prayer in on the final night.
Absolutely.
I believe we all have these God opportunity moments in our lives that can really change our trajectory, or maybe not change our trajectory, but get us more focused on the path that we're supposed to be on. So I want to kind of look forward a little bit now, because here's the thing. If somebody doesn't know who you are and all they did was judge life based upon what they see on your social media, et cetera. And we make I told you before we got on the podcast, I'm like, look, your daily affirmations, what you're thankful for every day, that stirs me when I see it. But the thing is that the journey to fearless happiness was full of so much stuff that it almost was like the training ground for where you are now and where you're headed. I'm a big proponent of Romans 8:28, where it says, all things work together for good for those that love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. It doesn't say everything is good. It says he'll take everything and make good out of it.
Right.
And so in the mindset game, and it is a game, guys, every time we deal with anything, we have a choice to make. And in that choice is we choose how to respond, we choose how to act, we choose how to react.
Right.
So now that you're looking at Max and what he's doing today and what his plans are for the future and what the path that he's on now, like you said, you're a grandfather of 10, you've got all this going for you. What would you say to the person who's not there yet? What would you say to the person that's like, I have not found my purpose now. I'm still being chased by the sneaky disease. Because I guarantee you see it in your coaching and dealing with addiction. And like you said, we all see addiction and we think it's, alcohol, drugs, but it's food, it's sex, it's
Right.
working out. There's people that are gym addicts, so it's an all-encompassing thing. What do you say to that person that hasn't emerged or hasn't gotten their focus straight? What would you say to that person who being as a person who has come through that process?
Well, one thing that was taught to me by that sponsor is, right, through his own actions and obviously words, is don't quit. Don't quit on yourself, right? You're going to go through these struggles, whether you're sober or not, right? But what I've learned in my sobriety is to lean in, all right, to embrace the suck, as you've heard probably before, right? And I've had to embrace that suck so many times. But as I'm going through, and it's trusting the process, right? As I'm going through that, I always keep in mind, like, I'm going to learn something from this. It used to not be that way. But as the longer I stayed sober and the lessons I've learned, I always go, okay, this is going to be tough, but I know I got something that God wants me to learn through this experience. So I'm not going to quit on myself, because he hasn't quit on me. People that are nearest and dearest to me have never quit on me. So that would be my advice, right? Is lean into that suck, embrace that suck, and know that for me, God's not going to quit on you. So don't quit on yourself. Yeah, you're going to get the bruised knees, the scraped knees, you're going to fall on your face. But I always liken it to that famous Rocky movie, right? That one where he's talking to his son, right? It's not about how hard you can hit. It's about when you get knocked down, how many times you get back up and you keep moving forward.
Yes.
Right? Because it's true. Like, I've learned that in my recovery, right? I'm going to make mistakes. I'm not perfect, but the one thing they teach us in that program is progress, not perfection. Right. And as I try to strive to be the best that I can be and the most spiritual as I can be, right, I know God's up there looking at me and to say, keep going, right? Like, you're going to be okay, right? And it's not about being perfect. It's just about, for me, this is what I tell my clients or anybody I'm with, whether it's a sponsor or just friends, right? I go, look, I don't expect you to be perfect, but I expect perfect effort, which means you get up. For instance, for us recovering people, right? I always say you get up. All you have to worry about is from the time you get up till the time you go to bed. And if you don't pick up a drink or a drug between that time and you don't hurt anybody, you've had a perfect day in sobriety, right? It makes it easier. Then they go, oh, I don't have to do all that. No, like, you'll learn how to do the stuff that comes your way. But like my sponsor always told me, he goes, if you don't stick a needle in your arm and you don't get drunk, there's hope. But when you, like, if you do that again, he goes, I have to wait till you come back if you make it. Because he knows me. Like, I'm not a moderate, right? It's pedal to the metal till the wheels fall off. And so that's the way I look at life too, is like, God has gotten me through so much in the last 7 years that I know, like, if I just keep my faith, that pedal to the metal, right? I trust the process and that he's going to take care of me. I can't go wrong. Yeah, I'm going to experience some stuff. I might not like it at the time, as you know, we all go through stuff, but I know when I get to the other side, it's going to be like, oh, that's what I needed to learn. Cool. All right, let's go. And the next one, next lesson.
Well, Max, we have had quite the discussion today, and I think we've arrived at a such a time where, like you said, just don't quit. Just if you can make it through all that you've been through, and then again, like we said at the beginning, the story's not unique, but it's not common either. But if you can make it through, if God's got you, God's got others.
Absolutely.
And so, but I also know too that you're paying it forward by helping others is a part of the recovery process as well. Right. So if there are those that are listening or watching or whatever today, what's the best way for them to follow you? What are some of the things they can do if what you have said today resonates with them and they really want to go deeper, or at the very least bend your ear a little bit to maybe share with you what they're going through? What are some of the best ways to follow you?
Well, you can find me on Facebook at max.nijst. That's max.nijst. I'm on Instagram as the Fearless Happiness Ninja. I'm on LinkedIn as Max Nijst. Or you can find my website and, find me there at maxnijst.org. I'm on all these, Twitter, everything. But the best ones you can reach me on is either Instagram or Facebook. If you have a question, DM me. I will get back to you. I promise. I think that's it right now.
I think you need to upgrade from Fearless Happiness Ninja to Fearless Happiness Jedi.
Right? Well, let me tell you a funny story. The reason I got that nickname is when I was writing my book, my mentor and coach who I was working with that was helping me with it, he goes, "Dude, I've never seen you mad or pissed off or anything," right? He goes, "You're always smiling every time we meet. Even when I get on your case, you just smile back at me." And he goes, "You know what I'm going to call you? I'm going to call you the Fearless Happiness Ninja." And I'm like, okay. And then he ended up passing up COVID in 2021. But you know what I mean? But that's why I love it, because it's a term of endearment now, because my friend said, "You're the Fearless Happiness Ninja."
Absolutely. Well, Max, we'll put the links in the show notes as well for those that arrive that way. Get his book. It is on Amazon. I confirmed that before our interview today. So
awesome.
Max, thank you so much for being on the show. I believe that there's going to be a lot of lives impacted, a lot of lives changed, because, and again, I always end the show this way, and I think it applies certainly here. Just because you have the knowledge, knowledge is not power. Applied knowledge is power. God bless everybody. That is going to do it for this episode of Keep This in Mind. For more, visit davidaspecht.com. Like, follow, and subscribe. Thank you for listening, and remember, applied knowledge is power. God bless.